I read a huge number of scripts as part of my job. I open a script really hoping to find a new voice. Hi, I'm Ann Cattaneo. I'm the dramaturg at Lincoln Center Theater. The closest definition of a dramaturg is an editor in a publishing house, or specifically an acquisitions editor in a publishing house. Our primary responsibility, of course, is to read plays that are submitted to the theater, like an editor would read plays and make recommendations based on that. We also work on productions that new plays. We work as an editor would work with a writer on suggesting thoughts and rewrites, changes, cuts. When we work on classical plays, we do, prepare a text. We may make changes or cuts. It's a job that requires a knowledge of theater history, a knowledge of languages, a knowledge of literature. And it also requires a great working knowledge of theater, of actors, of directing, how plays are put together and plays are built. I come from a family of scientists. My father was a scientist, my mother studied chemistry, my brother went to MIT, and I was actually a physics major in college. And I got interested in theater just because I loved the theater that I was seeing at that time. I was living in the Bay Area, and I was fortunate enough to make some connections and get involved with the American Conservatory Theater during its glory days under Bill Ball. And I worked as the assistant to Edward Hastings, who was the associate artistic director. And that was really a connection and a relationship that changed my life. He was the one who said to me, you should go to graduate school in theater. He wrote me a letter, and I was accepted at the Yale School of Drama and Criticism. And then I was fortunate enough to actually get a job in the theater, and that was the literary manager at the Phoenix. And I came in to my first day of work to the second day of rehearsal of Uncommon Women and Others by Wendy Wasserstein, who turned to me and said, thank God you're here. And no one has ever had a happier introduction to their professional life than I have, courtesy of Wendy. I've worked at the Phoenix, at the acting company, at Second Stage. I came here, and I've been called dramaturg, literary manager. So as far as my experience goes, literary managers and dramaturgs are the same job. I've always liked the word dramaturg because nobody knew what it meant. For me, it also implies co-editing, as I do with John Guare, the Lincoln Center Theater Review, which is a literary review that we produce 3 times a year that is sort of an added conversation to the plays we present with our audiences. I also run the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, which is a large-scale project that the theater does for emerging stage directors. When needed, I do sometimes small, sometimes very massive research for actors in productions, if that's called for. So it's a kind of job that can be whatever you make it to be, depending on the needs of your theater and your own interests, I guess. We had an extraordinary time here on the Coast of Utopia. Hiding behind my door, I've kept off a long 4-page sheet of paper that I put together to really understand all the chronological specifics of that very complex play. Everything in that production, with very few exceptions, is true. I had the kind of wonderful task of seeing which scene belonged when. So everything that was needed by the company is on this rather long sheet. That was an exciting thing to find that kind of research, because that company was so in love with the play. They knew everything. So they didn't have to take rehearsal time asking questions like, when did Belinsky meet Herzen? They knew that. They could tell him not only when they knew it, but how, and it was all done. When you're a dramaturg, you work with the director, Mark Lamos, our director, who's working right now on the Grand Manor. The director is in charge of the interpretation, the director's in charge of the room. You're never doing anything the director doesn't know about. What I did for this was to use the great resources upstairs of the Lincoln Center Library for the Performing Arts. They actually have, correspondence between Catherine Cornell and her husband, Guthrie McClintock. Boyd Gaines plays Guthrie McClintock, and Kate Burton plays Catherine Cornell. So we arranged for the company to go upstairs and see this material. The play is, of course, by Pete Gurney, and he did meet Catherine Cornell when he was a young man. And he sets out very charmingly at the beginning of the play the actual meeting. It's the standard, lovely stage door encounter. Then the rest of the play is his imagined encounter. He's invited backstage, and they have a whole, scene, long play together. And we're now at the beginning of a tech rehearsal, which is traditionally the time when the dramaturg goes away or sits at the back of the house. And all of these people who are passing behind us have very important things to ask Mark, and my job is done, basically. Each production is totally different, and that's one of the great things about being a dramaturg. If you look around my office, you'll see piles of books about spirit rituals that I worked on when we did Joe Turner's Come and Gone, along with books about orgasm, which I used for In the Next Room by Sarah Rule. Every 6 months, it's something radically different. This is the ideal job for people who love literature, who speak languages, who understand and love actors. When I go on to a stage and I see a ghost light, I'm a happy person, and that has never ceased. It's a funny combination of characteristics. And having people recognize me on the street is not something that I enjoy. If I did, I wouldn't be happy in the job.